Hi, I'm Josanne Wright Callender, the author of the Happy Little Garbage Truck picture book and educational program. And I'm really excited to talk about this today because in doing the research on how positive mindset activities such as learning affirmations and positive self talk have a greater impact on a person than I thought because they actually change the brain. And I became interested in this area prior to this particular period of time because as a special ed teacher, a lot of my training had to do with physiology and anatomy, which I thought was pretty fascinating. Even had classes in high school, which was sort of like what fueled my interest, and also in college. And the whole thing about brain research is that it continues to change and it becomes even more extensive and expansive over time. Um, in my field, I was interested because I really wanted to find out how to teach the students that I was teaching at different periods of my um, professional life. I started with children who were physically and otherwise health impaired, um, who had cognitive delays, learning disabilities, and then later on, I began teaching children with autism. So it was always a factor. How does the brain work? How can we uh, do a more effective job of teaching certain skills? And then when my father uh, developed Alzheimer's, it became even more of an interest to me because I wanted to find out how to help him do a better job in his day to day activities and feel more involved in a life that was manageable. And it's a very sad disease and devastating. But, the overall thing that we learned was through patience and love, this is the best type of attitude that you can have when working with people in all aspects of your life. And that's why positive affirmations are so very important. So, one thing that I found out was that with expectation, I think let me refer to my notes. Expectancies and learned associations change the brain chemistry. And that's what affirmations do. We have a positive expectancy, and then we learn ways of how to tap into that. And that's what actually physically changes our brain. It helps us with stress, manage stress, um, immune system reactions. It reduces anxiety when we're in stressful situations, elevated hormone levels. It does so many things. And I was wondering, how in the world does this happen? Well, one author and one researcher said that thoughts are actually tangible. And we all know the power of thoughts. Just, having someone who's inspired us in a speech. I love looking through the YouTube for high school graduation speeches by different famous people. And these thoughts that they portray are so inspirational and positive that it really encourages me. Actually, thoughts do have the power to transform, and that's more than just an idea. It's actually doing something within the brains, the circuitry and the chemistry of the brain. And so, what I researched and found was that thoughts actually do have an effect on the circuitry and the chemical soup in which neurons receive messages through. Um, See, they said, I want to get this right. Thoughts travel through the brain and neurons fire together in specific ways depending on the information that is being handled. And so this actual activity sets up the new patterns that change the neural structure. And it's a lofty, it's more than, I'm not a scientist and I'm still learning so much about this, but I do remember one study that they did on London cabbies. Now, it's not just a cab driver. The London cabbie has to go through this school which they have to learn all of the streets. And there's so many. If you've ever been to London, the streets are so intricately woven and intertwined, and there's small streets and half streets, and they just kind of dovetail into different other areas. Well, they have to learn not only the street pattern, but they have to learn the architectural um, elements that people would see in passing, and the historical monuments. So they have to learn this whole, it's like taking a history lesson to become a cabbie. Plus, you have to know the grid of London. So they examined the structure of cabbies' brains, London cabbies in particular, and they found out their hippocampus was larger. It had expanded because they had so much visual and spatial information that they had to contain, and that's what the hippocampus does. It contains our visual spatial memories, and the longer they drove, the more expansive this hippocampus had become because of the cognitive demands of their driving. And so that was one of the more tangible things that I found, that the actual physical structure of the brain grows, but also in meditating. That was something that I hadn't anticipated. Um, Before moving on to meditating, think about the cabbie. He has to do the same thing over and over again. And this is going back to the repetition that we talked about yesterday, and how that brought a different type of demand, because out of repetition, the memory grows. And so that spatial and visual memory was growing within these cabbies' minds as they did these different drives every day. Now, in meditating, they said that this one study, this lady, Sarah Lazar, and her team in Harvard found that mindfulness, and it was actually 8 weeks of this mindfulness-based stress reduction program, was found to actually increase the cortical thickness of the hippocampus, and that governs learning and memory as well. So, and they found that these areas of the brain control or play a really huge role in controlling emotion regulation and self-referential processing. And that's just thinking within the mind about oneself, and actually takes a person out of themselves and thinks, it helps us to think in larger scopes. So one thing one writer said, which was, I guess, a better, easier way to understand it. He says it helps reduce the activity in the me center of the brain. So, it's just, to me, fascinating that all of these things are changed with thoughts, which we thought is before as an ephemeral type of activity, but they're actually tangible. And tomorrow I have a little bit more research that I'm doing, and hope to talk about some of the ways the brain changes even more specifically, before we get back to what specific affirmations can we say that would help our children learn how to cope with stress and in different situations. So this may extend until next week, but it's just all very good information. Thank you for attending this little talk, and I'm excited about it because I'm learning so much more than I thought I would in approaching this topic. So thank you.